Hi everyone, this is Stylish Ram, AsianCultureVulture.com. We're in Penzance, Cornwall, and we're here for a new art exhibition called Invisible Narratives. This has been curated by Lubaina Himid, the 2017 Turner Art Prize winner, Britain's most prestigious art prize. She's a globally renowned artist, very famous for uncovering hidden histories and putting people of colour back into the bigger picture. So she's presenting new work in Invisible Narratives along with two other artists who she has curated, Rebecca Chesney and Magda Stawarska-Beavan. So let's find out more. Tell us a little bit about this exhibition, Invisible Narratives. The title itself is very intriguing, I think.
Well, I suppose I've been preoccupied for a long time about the stories that are part of history, the narratives that are part of our lives that you kind of know are there, but you can't see them, or you can't necessarily hear them, or you can't read about them, or they're not in museums. So I guess over the years I've talked to both of these artists, either together or separately. We have all sorts of conversations about, well, about everything actually,
yeah, sure,
between family and the weather and politics and art.
Mm.
But we've had conversations about what's important to us, and one of the things that I found about both their work, both Rebecca Chesney's work and Magda Stawarska-Beavan's work, is that they are intrigued by what's there, but what you wouldn't necessarily know that you know is there. So there are several things happening. Sometimes you're in a place, it seems familiar, but you don't know why. Or you're near a building and it doesn't seem familiar, but there's something that you hear or something that you see that then reminds you of something else. And because I'm a little bit obsessed with the traces of political trauma left behind, I can kind of hear sounds in buildings. I feel I can smell atmospheres. And so somehow there's a triangular conversation here between the three of us, right, about what we see and hear, what we think audiences see and hear, and the artwork, in a sense, is a place where all these conversations come together.
Yeah. What was the sense you wanted to, with the dressing table and the images within that are contained? And somebody can go and have a look, touch, which is quite rare for a gallery to be in a space where you're allowed to kind of probe the artwork almost.
Yeah, well, I've recently become much more interested again in audiences being performers. So I was trained as a theatre designer, and so I've always made work with an audience in mind. Either that old thing of an audience looking at a play, looking at a ballet or an opera and being part of it because their heat, their energy is kind of making the action happen in a particular way. But also recently I've been able to make work where audiences can actually touch it and change it. Very often the work I've made, you get the impression that you could change it, but you couldn't because of the way it was made.
Yes.
But it seems to me that if an audience member can come to a gallery and actually shift something, even if it's just, okay, I'm in a gallery, I can open a drawer and shut a drawer, which you can't usually do, then when you're outside the gallery, in your own world, then maybe you could do some really tiny thing that you thought you couldn't do.
Right.
So it's to kind of extend that feeling of agency and that feeling of being able to have an influence, even if a tiny way.
Well, that's a very powerful thing because a lot of your work is about people coming to listen to those voices that have been hidden, and you've said before that everybody can do a little bit and it becomes a larger thing. We all have issues that we're trying to address, and every person that addresses them is adding to the volume for change in some respect.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a very important part of your work, and something like the dressing table here is symptomatic of that, wanting to have that conversation, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, because I know that audiences come to galleries, to museums, with their own experience. They come with their own lives, their own histories, their own politics. So they're actually bringing something to the spaces. And we as artists are bringing something to the spaces. And it's a perfect place for conversation, for a kind of interaction between the two. And in a sense, because quite a lot of the time the places that we're having these conversations are publicly funded places, which we all own, and when they're object museums, we own all the objects in those museums, so they're in a way the perfect place to have those kinds of dialogues.
Lots of ships queued on the skyline, all waiting for their turn. What are they waiting for?
Shouting,
to tow and construction.
motors revving,
Summer, there's always construction.
men in control, wide open spaces.
The sound installation, with sound and images, the desk, and which we'll be having, which is here and exhibited by Magda, and it has a map of Zanzibar. What is how do you see your relationship to the place you were born in and now?
Well, it's a funny thing, you know. I left when I was very, very small, 3-4 months old. So in a sense, you would think, I know nothing about that place. But it was always at the center of conversations with my mother. But I was slightly fearful of the place. I was fearful about going back. By the time I was 10 years old, there was a revolution there, so I was fearful again. Then as I was a teenager, I was fearful again because I was a teenager. And then there were all kinds of reasons that I didn't go back. I couldn't speak Swahili, so I found that embarrassing. But in my 40s, I got to a pitch where I had been to so many other places, to small towns in Cuba, tried to get myself lost in Venice, all kinds of complicated places that sort of reminded me of what I thought Zanzibar might be like. And tried to feel the fear and do it anyway. And so in my 40s, I went back to Zanzibar. I flew to Dar es Salaam. I got on this tiny plane about the size of this chair, landed in Zanzibar. The doors opened, went down the steps. I thought, crikey, I know this place.
Right.
This is so familiar. It's like going from Preston to Manchester.
Wow.
It just felt like home.
Really?
I thought, I spent 40 odd years worrying about this, and then here I am. So I suppose I feel like it is my home, but it isn't my home. I don't really want to live there. My relatives that did live there have all gone, spread to different parts of the world now. Yeah. Some are back in the Comoran Islands, which is where my father's from.
Oh, right.
But it remains somewhere in my heart.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's what it is.
Sure. So you won the Turner Prize in 2017. Famously, you became the first black woman to receive the prestigious prize. Do you feel a burden or expectation? How has it been now, nearly 2 years on? Well, 2 years on from that.
It's not a burden, certainly.
No.
It was jolly good fun.
Right.
Really good to win it. And it has allowed me, and I'm going to try and make it continue to allow me, to do many of the things I was always doing.
Right.
Talking to artists, working with other artists, making shows with other artists, and saying the things about the world that I want to say. But of course the advantage, if you win the Turner Prize, is a few more people are listening, and in sort of broader places, there are lots of little films, or I'm on the radio, or people ask me to speak at things, which kind of takes up a lot of time that I could be spending painting, but I want to do that. Yeah. I feel that that's one of the most important things about
I think that's very important. I mean, having that conversation, making that conversation louder and getting more people to hear it, because I think there is a feeling, especially amongst, non-white communities, shall we say, in Britain, that the colonial experience hasn't really been visited properly, hasn't really been confronted. And that's something that you've done. Sometimes you've used humour to address that, which I think is an interesting aspect of your work. Can you talk about that? I mean, these are serious subjects, but yet there's a sense of irreverent fun almost in some of them. Not fun in a but in a kind of slightly ironic way. There's a sense of play there, and people, I guess, when they come to your work, see something different going on. But it's a similar kind of point you're trying to make about British colonial history as some of the more maybe serious works that we come across in history and politics.
Well, I don't think you can even begin to have those conversations unless you have a genuine desire to exchange ideas. And if the work that you make is, other people can make whatever kind of work they like. Actually, I'm an incredibly tolerant person. But I want to make work that people can approach and challenge. But I don't want to have a fight, I want to have a conversation. And my primary number one audience is other black people. I want to say, this is my telling of this story, what's your telling of this story? And I know that in having that conversation, then that opens it out to everybody else. Then it makes it very, very easily accessible, not in a kind of dumbed down way, I hope, but in a way that I just think you can't begin to improve anything without being very open and very honest. And in a sense, what I'm trying to do with this show, sharing with these two artists, is to say that we have concerns also that are beyond race. That race is not an irrelevant thing, but there are human conversations that black people have with each other, as well as we have with other people who are not the same as us. And I feel that in the past, and some of it's our own doing as artists from the black diaspora, we have boxed ourselves into only having black conversations about race. Whereas in the everyday, we do more than that. And we have an effect on more than that. And so part of what's happening in this exhibition is I'm giving myself permission to have conversations in public with the people that I have conversations with, who've had direct influence on my work and me on theirs. And it's important. I mean, that's one of the things about winning the Turner Prize, is that I can do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you interested in listening to the voices of the past and those voices that have been hidden or obscured?
Well, yes, but maybe not as direct way, because most of the time I record contemporary city, and I record it from a very personal point by using binaural microphones. So the microphones are worn in my ears, and in a way, when I move through the city, I just collect the sound data, and then of course I sort of put those, make compositions out of those very everyday sounds. So it's sort of sound in particular point, like the recording of Istanbul is from 2014. In the summer we're actually election campaign for Erdogan to become president and be re-elected. But the sound is a capsule of that sort of time. But then, of course, the listener sort of brings their own sort of experiences and the narratives maybe from past or present.